All right, sick. We are live. All right, cool. Hello and welcome to episode 139 of Together BHA. I am, for the foreseeable, hopefully forever, joined we are by Adam.
Hi there, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. How are you?
Oh, yeah, the world's ended as of yesterday. We lost the game. So apart from that, I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. And of course, Craig as well. How's it going, Craig?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, all good. Ready to jump into what should be a lot of talk around yesterday and also Tuesday.
Yeah, yes, there is a lot to chat about. Let's save the worst for last, I suppose, with Everton, and start off with a couple of things that happened in the week. Obviously, the big cup game, the giant glamour tie away at Cardiff. I didn't get to watch any of it. I don't believe you two watched much of it either. I watched the long highlights that was posted, but I couldn't quite bring myself to watch the replay that Cardiff posted, the full 90 minutes. Either one of you, in your own time, what did you think? I thought the lineup was pretty good. I think that's what we needed to do. Like we posted a very youthful lineup, 11 changes, and we won the game. For me, I was pretty happy with it. But what were your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't want to subject many people to watching 90 minutes of Cardiff run coverage of that game, but at the same time, it's what we discussed last time, right? As in this cup is a sort of a nice to have if we continue to go down it, but let's not do it at the cost of tiring out the best players that we have, knowing that we're limited in depth in some areas. So seeing that lineup that came out where we kind of balanced it out with a lot of youth, incredibly young squad. I think the average age was something ridiculous, wasn't it? In the very low 20s. Plus then giving some time to our players that maybe haven't grown accustomed to, I would say English, but given the tie, British football up until this point. And it was great. Got the victory, and then we go on and we get to spank another Welsh side in the next tie. So I thought it was everything you could ask for. Completely rotated team, got the victory, good to go.
Yeah, full on. I think in terms of I think as we said last week, it's exactly what we expected, is exactly what we wanted. And then, like you said, it was a nice to have. If it didn't go well, then, onwards and upwards. But also good to have Moda and Zakiri both on the score sheet for the first time as well. Zakiri's working hard, does a lot for the team, doesn't really get his just rewards. So it was good to see him on the sheet, and Moda as well getting his first goal. So, like you said, we're mixing it up with the Roberts and the Caicedo and seeing those guys also there, but giving Alzate, Moda, Zakiri that sort of time to shine against maybe a lesser side, knowing that they can do it and get some confidence as well. It seemed like the perfect Tuesday evening, to be honest.
Seemed also to be along those same lines, just as perfect for Enoch Mwepu, one of the shining lights of that game. And, some players we see come in and it takes them quite a long time to adapt to. Alexis McAllister being one of them, right? I feel like he's taken almost a full calendar year to cut with the program. It seems that even just after one game, Mwepu looks like he's comfortable at least a level below. He bossed that game from what I can gather. And the assist to Moda for the opening goal was excellent. He took a knock, but he was on the bench for this game, so I'm assuming it wasn't too serious or anything like that. Swansea away next. For me, same again. Put out a different 11. Let those same players keep playing. And like you said, the age thing. I think if you took Jason Steele out of the equation, I think it was 20.6 or something was the average age of that team.
Crazy. The Mwepu pass was, just a perfect ball. My only hesitancy there before crowning him as our greatest signing ever is the fact that if you watch that a couple of times, God, the Cardiff players just gave him acres of space. They just kept backing off, and the computer's gonna calculate if you give him that much time, which he did. But the other goal was nice, right? As in, we had a combination of not only Zakiri scoring, a pretty well-placed finish after a lot of hard work seemingly in that game from him, but also Caicedo had a nice little run to set that up. So like I said, it was nice to see all those players that were kind of slightly bubbling away beneath the surface get some just rewards.
Yeah, completely agree. I think just in terms of the next round as well, I think we should see exactly the same. You again do that rotation. Go to Swansea. Obviously, it'll be nice for Potter, see some friendly faces and that. But I would absolutely expect and probably want to see the same team and just keep going with this and see how far they can get. Whilst the main focus is on the league. But it'll be a good game. What is that? That's week commencing 20th of September, I think it is. So a few weeks away yet. And again, we'll get on to transfer talk in terms of who was in that team that now won't be. But in terms of what we're going to see from that 11 and keeping it at that 20.5 age range, that would be probably the best course of action.
You don't think Graham will get a little bit emotional in there, try and get one back on Swansea, given it is his old hunting ground, his old stomping ground? I
mean, he left Swansea, didn't he? I think it's more Swansea's going to try and attack us and get their own back. So I think you do forget that he was only there for a year, so just moved straight from Ostersund, spent 12 months there, and then moved on. So I can't imagine there's too much loyalty there, but some friendly faces, sure.
Well, maybe my prediction is Dan James scores for us against Swansea in that game as we sign him on loan.
There might be
might
be some very upset Swansea fans for that.
Hit him with the old double trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's about it for covering that game. The coverage wasn't superb. The team was a backup 11. We got the job done. So I think we're good to move on if you two are. We talked about it a very little bit in the midweek on the WhatsApp chat, but let's just talk about it a little bit now. Was the Premier League news that affects us as much as everybody, that they are trying to put the hammer down on any players traveling to red-listed countries. For us, that would include Alexis McAllister for sure, because Argentina is currently a red-listed nation. Bissouma possibly, because he's also, I think that they would be traveling to a red-listed nation, even though Mali isn't. And I think there's one or two others in there that might be affected by it. Caicedo as well, I think. Salah has been called up by the Egyptian national squad. They posted that the other day. He is listed in their squad, and Liverpool and the Premier League are saying they're not allowed to go. This is going to run on, and we've only got a couple of days to wrap it up. What do you guys make of this decision by the Premier League?
I mean, I think we're already seeing some backlash from it, from some of the clubs and players already that are seemingly trying to force their way and are just going to travel regardless of that guidance. So I think I'm personally more interested in what the repercussions will be for players stepping out of line as opposed to the actual rules that get put into place as a whole. That may then prove to be interesting. I mean, we've already seen some of the players like Salah when we in last year, when didn't he like go to his brother's wedding in Egypt at the height of COVID and then got COVID and was out for. So clearly there is already a precedent that has been set by some of the players where they will just do what they want. So we'll see how it works out. I mean, my ideal hope personally and selfishly is that we end up playing one of these teams where another player has stepped and they don't get to face us, which will be nice. I think we're blessed and cursed in the same way, in the sense that obviously we don't have every single player being subverted to this in some ways. So we don't have to worry too much about 11 players stepping out of line. At worst, we have a couple.
Yeah. And I think that's really the bit there, isn't it? Like you said, it's the consequences of not abiding by those regulations or that ask, in terms of, I think it's the right call. I think, given previous, incidents like the Salah one with going to the wedding and stuff like that, there are certain bits and pieces there where there is going to be some fallout from it, but I think it's the right call. It's just the reaction of the players. We saw Alexis McAllister talk quite openly about being allowed to go to the Olympics and how it meant so much to him, in terms of someone that's 21 years old and is only recently starting to play for their country. That messaging from a Brighton perspective is you can't go. Maybe there's some perspective there in terms of it's just for now. You are going to play for your country for years to come. But, I think how they handle those players, and especially how they handle those players who step out of line, like you said, could benefit some teams, but also could hamper some. It's interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are paying the wages, and FIFA are upset about it. But, ultimately those are the rules that have been put in place, and we'll see what happens.
When you first said something happened this week that could potentially impact all of the teams, I thought you were talking about Ronaldo. You duped me a little bit.
That was going to be my next one. That is going to be something I did want to bring up too. We're obviously not a Premier League centric podcast. We're a Brighton one, but we are going to have to run up against one of the greatest players to ever grace the game now twice in a season for the foreseeable. £20 million per Fabrizio Romano, the great man himself. Good deal or not? 2-year deal, 36 years old. I think I'm of the opinion that he could probably do an Ibrahimovic and go to 40 and still be a class act. It feels like an absolute steal for me, knowing what Man United needed to be competitive was a striker, a goal scorer, because Cavani is not that, and Greenwood's very young, and Rashford is injury prone and Rashford. So it seems like an superb signing, especially then to take him away from Man City in the process. I thought that was out of nowhere too.
Yeah, it's really easy to look stupid by saying this is either a very good or very bad signing, because I don't know. I mean, all you can say at the moment is Ronaldo has proved himself to be a ridiculously top tier goal scorer wherever he's been. Is he still at the point where he can do that in the toughest league that there is? I think he still can, but he's not the player that I think people want to remember, even from his Real Madrid days. Like, he is now, he'll sit up front, and we've seen this for Portugal. He'll sit up front. He doesn't do a lot of pressing. He doesn't track back a lot, but he will score, and he'll shank a bunch of free kicks into the stands, which Bruno Fernandes will be furious about. And Bruno Fernandes fantasy Premier League owners will be furious about, because he'll take all the penalties away from him. So as a goal scorer and almost as a sort of something for the fans at Man U, it's interesting. I think for the league, I'm jealous of the Brighton fans that will get to see him play, obviously in the flesh at the Amex. It's a bit of fun. It's not a long-term solution for them, though, is it really? Also, not truly a position of need. They need a centre midfielder. That's what Man U need.
They do. They need a really quality box-to-box midfielder that's very comfortable holding the ball, good in tight spaces, can distribute really well, and probably young as well to help them anchor. I can think of one particular player like that. Let's hope that they don't get the idea as well.
Yeah. Well, if they open their checkbook and put a big enough number, but they've spent all their money on Ronaldo's wages now, so that won't happen.
You forget that they got Sancho in the same window as well. Just in terms of how does that fit from a team perspective? Obviously having a talisman in your team like Ronaldo is perfect, but now you're going to juggle to keep Fernandes happy. If he's not going to be on free kicks and pens anymore, like, is he going to be happy with that? Probably. But you got the Rashfords, the Greenwoods, and the Sancho now that know that at Ronaldo's level, he's going to be expecting to play. So, again, come on to the whole Dan James talk in terms of what's happening. But in terms of, you've brought in someone that's such a high caliber and who will demand to play, and the fans will also demand to play. What if they have a ropey couple of games? What do you do then? And also, how do you manage someone that's nearly 37 now, especially playing multiple games in a week? Italian football is typically quite slow as a progression as well. So how do you react to the frantic nature of the Premier League sometimes? Like you said, he doesn't track back. He doesn't do the high press that Liverpool and Chelsea and subsequently Everton are now doing. So how does that fit in with the strategy in terms of what Ollie's doing? Is he expecting just for them to take complete control and just have him sit? It will be interesting, but
I sometimes wonder if you're giving a bit too much credit with the idea of Ole has any idea what he is doing from his day-to-day basis sometimes.
That too. I mean, in terms of just what happened over those 24 hours, given that we've been talking about Darwin Núñez and Cucurella for about a month, for someone to go from Italy to the UK and get all the terms agreed within 24 hours, that was impressive.
Well, Rio Ferdinand gave him a call and it was done. So what's the benefit of just bringing your mates back in some ways, isn't it? And you have to imagine Bruno Fernandes probably was in his ear for a fair amount of that. I mean, he tweeted out or Instagrammed out afterwards that little picture of basically playing with his idol. So for him, it must be a dream come true in many ways, even though he plays with him at Portugal.
It's also been confirmed that Fergie gave him a call, didn't he? Apparently gave him a bit of a bollocking at the idea of going to City. So even at his age, I wouldn't particularly want to answer a phone call to an irate Fergie at any point in time. And knowing how close Ronaldo still is to Ferguson, I think however money-driven these players clearly are, especially at the very top, I think at his age, he can afford to bring sentimental value into it. And he's not going to find much better than Fergie giving him a call and screaming down the phone at him at the idea of going to City. So I think that probably helped go over the line as well. Yeah,
it's always, obviously terribly sad to see City fans get a little bit upset, but they'll get over it.
I just can't wait to see what these lads that were burning their Ronaldo shirts on Wednesday are going to be doing now. They're
going to scrape up the ashes and sort of like put them on the Old Trafford pitch now as sort of dedication.
Talking about our game, let's actually get onto it 16 minutes in. Our actual Premier League game with our first team, not our under-23s. Everton at home. We'd never lost to Everton in the Premier League at home prior to this. We'd lost every single game away, but we drew 2 and 1-2 at home. We did have the benefit of playing them generally when they were on a down patch most years, and we would run into them when they were on fire at their place. Last year, I think we were like their 11th game unbeaten or something. When you looked at the lineups to begin with, one change for us, Jakob Moder in, Solly March out, hamstring injury. Not good sign already. That's no fullback in the 20-man squad. No recognised fullback in the 20-man squad. And we've just sent out Kobovnik on loan, one of our recognised fullbacks.
With a buy option as well. You might never see him again, huh?
With a buy option. To me, if he's injured, he's injured. And Veltman hasn't played a single minute of Premier League football. I can understand easing him back in. The big thing for me was looking at the Everton team and thinking this is definitely a level above anything we've played so far.
Yeah, this is not your old Everton. Although you might think it with Rafa Benitez playing a 4-4-2. But this is, the Evertons of the last few years have been challenged with this lack of pace in many areas and a really sort of stagnant central focus in the pitch. It's not that team, and we saw that, right? So that insane level of attacking pace that they have on the wings, with Gray, who they signed for 50 pence this season, which seems like really good value that they got out of that.
1.5 million for a 25-year-old English.
What does 1.5 get? I mean, that's insane. Andros Townsend, I mean, let's not say too many nice things about him, but, he's quick and he does a job. And then, of course, you've got Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin up front, very high-quality stuff. But the people that make that team tick are Allen and Doucouré in the centre there that will just maraud and break up play, and they're also good with passes too. There's so much to talk about with this game, but this is not the Everton that we played before, and I think we saw that, and I think Benitez was smart about his tactics.
Yeah, I think you took the words out of my mouth right at the end there in terms of tactically, they have the players in order to cause any team problems in this league. And, we'll see that throughout this season. But you're spot on. The main takeaways was really, the pace on the wings where they completely outdone us with no recognized wing backs in our team. That only was, enhanced or even more visible than it should be. But the Allen and the Doucouré in the middle just running things. We're so used to the last couple of games. We've seen Basuma and Lallana do that. They controlled everything from the centre. They've very high pressure, very high press, and with no recognised pace out and either centrally or down each wing, it was always going to be difficult.
Yeah, it was tough. Before we get too deep into the criticisms, of which there are plenty, I do want to say, do you think it's fair to say that we we were beaten convincingly yesterday. I think that's pretty safe for everybody to acknowledge, whether they want to or not, whether it's nice to acknowledge it or not. We were pretty comfortably beaten. Do you think, because I don't think we would be as convincingly beaten if we were playing, for example, Lamptey and Solly March yesterday. I think that it is a much more competitive game if we were playing two of our recognized wingbacks, fullbacks in their places of position. I think that the game is a very different looking one. Do you agree with that?
So there were times last season when he was fit where we dropped Lamptey against teams that had put in Veltman against teams that we believed had more attacking threat on the wings, because we knew we needed to, consolidate a little bit more. Having said that, would it have been good if we had two players playing in the positions they play in? Yes, it really would have. I mean, seeing Pascal Gross and Jakub Moder as in Potter's system, we know the importance of those two roles. Almost in many ways, could argue that they're the most important positions on the pitch. And the same with Pep's, Man City teams as well. Those right and left wing backs are incredibly important to how they overlap and how they get up the pitch. We just didn't have that. And what happened was because of, and someone asked us this, and we gave him shit last week in the chat about how is Gross too slow, and we threw out all this data and things like that. Well, Gross isn't too slow until he's facing someone with a lot of pace and when we're pinned down tactically. But what happened was, because of the way Benitez laid out the team, you'll notice that everything that we tried to do down the right side and everything that worked in the first half against Watford last game, where we had Webster move out, pass it to Basuma or pass it out to Gross. We had these nice overlaps. Everyone pushed super high up on the right side and everything went through that. Because of the way Richarlison could push onto Webster, because they were playing the two up front, essentially, the pace of Gray pushing in and then the threat from the midfield, we could never properly get the ball out the right-hand side. And because Gross and Moder were so scared of the pace coming back at them when we lost the ball, they couldn't push up. So the tactics just fell apart.
Yeah, and I think that's the credit where it's due in terms of, were we hampered by not playing two natural wing backs? Yes, but that doesn't negate the fact that tactically they also got it spot on, and we were beaten convincingly to that effect. But that's what pace gives you on those wings, and it's cracking observation in terms of playing the two up front means that you compress those three centre backs, especially when Duffy's probably not as comfortable on the ball as the other two. So in terms of that constant pressure, and Alan and Doucouré also coming across to pin Gross and pin McAllister, who got taken out at half time to try and change something. Every time it even got close to the touchline, there was always three people there, whether it's Gray, Alan and Dina, or whether it's the other side. Very difficult game. Probably, and you could see it after a good start. We tried to play our game straight out. First 10 to 15 minutes, we were making something, but once Everton got into the game, it was very hard to see what we were going to change. And I think that's at half time where we did try and change something. I was expecting something a little bit different, but evidently nothing did change.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Again, when you've got a team of 20 and you've got no recognized fullback or wingback, it's tough, because even Veltman is not a fullback. He played, his last two seasons for Ajax, I think he played 3 appearances at fullback. Every other one was centre half. Like, that's not his trade at all. Not even a straight up right back. And Webster the same. And like you said, Adam, like the wingback system similar to Pep, and well, the less said about Manchester City left wingbacks at the minute, the better. But the wingback system for us is so important, and to be so kind of negligent from a recruitment perspective, it feels, is just unbelievable. I sometimes wonder, and I don't know if I said it to you all or if I was just thinking it at the time. I wonder if, we're 3 days away now from the window closing, and we have Solly March who's hurt, Cucurella as a rumor, Lamptey who's hurt, and that's it for recognized wingbacks. I wonder if that decision yesterday was genuinely what Potter thought was his best chance, but also a message in his own way. of like, this is what I'm having to utilize. Like, can you not see that playing 2 central midfielders here is not my best option?
What else? Who else would he play there? Really? I just don't think we had.
He could have played 4 at the back.
When we did in the second half, right? That's what we
didn't get any
moving
better,
to.
Yeah.
so he, his experiment failed in the first half, which happens, right? It happens to every manager. And then tried to change to something that maybe suited the players that he had available to him, and it worked. As in, there was about 2 minutes where we looked like a really good side at the start of the second half, and then Veltman decided to sort of rugby tackle in the box, which didn't end up too well. I think one of the big things, and if you look at some of the stats around our attacking movement about this, so last week we had 48% of our attacks were developed down the right-hand side of the pitch. We talked about this last time. Everything was about the right-hand side. This week was 34% right side, and our left side was our dominant position for attacking. And that was because in the second half, when Veltman came on, people are absolutely slamming Veltman, rightfully, for his performance. But he was our most sprightly player outside of Yves Bissouma. He actually had some energy and he was pushing on, probably motivated by the fact that he gave away a penalty. But if you then look at actually sort of the pressures and the defensive stuff, Seamus Coleman didn't really do anything. So basically what it told us was we tried to make a bunch of stuff happen on the right-hand side. It didn't work. We then tried to move down the left-hand side. And we basically just got as far as Andros Townsend and things fell apart. We just started passing backwards, which we saw over and over and over again. Yeah,
I think, it's similar to Burnley as well, where you have that first half and it's not really working. You try and change something. Like you said, there was right at the start of that second half, it was like, okay, we're playing with probably more impetus and trying to influence the game a little bit more. Then all of a sudden you have a clumsy challenge and you're 2-0 down. That is where it got caught. If that doesn't happen and it still stays at 1-0, 70, 80 minutes in, we can continue to press and we continue to do it. Because at around 70 or 80 minutes, considering how hard they were pressuring and high pressing us, it did get to the 80-minute mark where they were 2-0 up, so they could sit back. But you would have hoped that they would run out of steam towards the end of the game and try and nick something from that point. But one clumsy challenge, they're 2-0 up. It makes it fairly comfortable for them. And ultimately, we didn't cause them too many problems.
And I feel like that's part of the problem, right? Like you look at the stats, like the overarching ones, and it feels like just Groundhog Day from last year and the year before that. 65% possession, 87% pass accuracy. Like they only had 78%. We dominated the ball. We were good at recycling the ball for the most part. But the key piece, we had 3 shots on target out of 14 attempts. We actually lost the XG war, which seems to be the new change. The new change in the Potter system is either losing the XG and winning the game, or just losing the XG. And we did a whole lot of pretty passing, even in the final third, and just nothing to come from it. In terms of the players that are on the pitch, who is there out there that you think stuck out like a sore thumb as like you would like to see them dropped next game, if anybody, other than the fullbacks who aren't fullbacks, of course?
Bissouma was obviously terrible. No, I mean, so Bissouma is far and away. I mean, he is. If we keep hold of him in the next few days, which hopefully we do, incredible work. He is such a. He's come on so much in the last even year that it's remarkable how good he is as a shining example, even on the same pitch as some of those other world-class Everton players. You have to say that these are internationals in their own right. Incredible. Who was bad? Well, I think you saw with Potter's change, Alexis was absolutely anonymous. Gave the ball away a lot. You mentioned earlier about him sort of getting into the spring of things and getting into the feel for the Premier League and the club. Every now and then he'll score a wonder goal and he'll look amazing, and he's really good at pressuring and harrying down the defense. And then other times you just think, God, I have no idea what Alexis is actually doing. He's such a Jekyll and Hyde player. That was the biggest one for me. I think I do want to spin it around though and just say a couple of, one of the good things that we saw is that outside of taking a penalty and then having a bit of handbags over it, like what did Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin actually do in that game? But on the flip side, our forwards did nothing. It was a game where basically up front, no one had any power, and we lost the game on the wings and in the midfield play in some ways from Alan Ducoré. But I think I just want to take a good thing. Like, what was good? The fact that we shut down 2 world-class forwards for the most part in that game, and we lost on mistakes and pace, in my opinion. So that sort of answered your question. Sort of just went on a different direction, but there you go.
Yeah. I think I agree. Just in terms of what we did see, obviously McAllister, a game to forget for him off at half time to try and change things around. But I think Maupay didn't do too much.
He didn't get the ball.
In terms of what exactly. So I can't remember that in too much. But there are some bits that we can take out of this in terms of good play, right? In Basuma, he looks like in a class of his own compared to the rest of the team yesterday. And just I think we come back to the Richarlison thing in terms of keeping him quiet. Basuma riled him up so damn much that it was amazing to watch. Like, I think there was one bit that the camera cuts to Basuma telling him to calm down and literally doing the opposite. So I think that battle between those two was amazing to watch just in general. Apart from the penalty, Calvert-Lewin really didn't have a sniff. So, we're talking around the 3 centre-backs, arguably, putting those 2 out in terms of not being able to do what they do and fully influence the game. Calvert-Lewin gets a lot from set pieces, didn't really have a sniff, which brings me on to Sanchez as well. The first goal aside, looked assured coming out and getting the ball. A couple of second half saves and a bit more comfort from him. Yeah. I'm not going to say that's the Sanchez that we know and love, like we said last week, but he did look better yesterday, and that's probably because he had more to do, to be fair.
He had that one shank, didn't he, where you're like, oh God, what did you do in there? And luckily nothing happened, but he did look better.
Yeah, and I think that, we've seen that a couple of times, and I don't think he's 100% there yet. But in terms of coming out for crosses, when you do have the Calvert-Lewins and you do have the Doucourés that are in that box, being able to deal with those relatively comfortably, and also coming out to claim a lot of stuff. I thought he was better, and that definitely helped. But I think that's also mitigated by the fact that he actually had to do a lot of stuff yesterday. So arguably there was more to watch from him. I think, otherwise Trossard's a very hard one to analyze in terms of a lot of the stuff that he did yesterday was good, but I feel that his target practice means that he just hits the keeper like 99% of the time. So he creates these chances and he's such a tricky forward, and he does get into those spaces where he gets himself available for a shot, but they're straight at Pickford. And it happened on a couple of times where it's like, we know that he can smack him in the bottom corner. We know that he can finish, but it's just, he needs to put it a foot either side. I know I'm just a guy on a podcast talking about an international forward not hitting the target properly, but there are certain times where he makes that chance for him, and it seems like he should be doing better with those chances.
Trossard is infuriating because sometimes you look at him, and Basuma aside, you go, Trossard might be our best player at the club. And as you say, he called up to the Euros for Belgium, a team that were they favourites at one point, or second favourites behind France or whatever. Sometimes his first touch is sort of circa 2015 Lukaku first touch, where it sort of just bounces completely away from him, and you're like, oh, you've got so much quality, you can spin a defender around and you lose the ball like that. I agree. I mean, I think that sums up all our forwards in this game, but it sometimes just sums up our forwards in that you want them to shoot, and then sometimes you see it and you're like, well, maybe don't do that again. Let's work the ball into the box. But I think just to round this bit out and hand back to Josh, the people calling for, we need a forward. I do get it. I think we do, but we could have had Robert Lewandowski playing up front yesterday. I think we still lose 2-0. There was just no service. That was yesterday. The forwards were not our problem.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I am one of those people that are desperate for a forward. But if you don't have any kind of victory in your one-on-ones out wide, what's the point in signing a different type of player, like a big man that I would like us to sign, if you're not going to be able to get the service into him? So the other player that stood out for me, there was a couple actually that I looked at that I felt kind of sorry for. And like, we don't have to talk too deeply on them, but Pascal Gross and Jakob Moder were the two that I felt the most sorry for. They're not wingbacks, and we've been seeing Pascal get away with it for the last 2 games because he's playing against teams that aren't particularly fast. And he, for example, he wasn't playing that. Why they didn't just swap Sarr around at some point in time last week, I don't know. When you just saw what happened this weekend, I feel bad for him because he's clearly just not a right wingback. And Jakob Moder seems to only ever get starts and opportunities in a wingback position, which is definitely not his forte either. When he comes on as a substitute in his favored position, he seems to make a pretty severe impact. The one player that stood out to me outside of Alexis, because I agree with you on that, and it kind of plays into the same thing, was Adam Lallana. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why. He is obviously a world-class player still and has that experience that no one else in the squad has with the way he can play. His technical ability is excellent. But you've both hit the nail on the head massively yesterday. Is the midfield battle was huge. Doucouré and Allen are both very physical, very strong, very stamina-led central midfielders. And too often yesterday, it ended up just being a 2v1 battle of Bissouma against both. And however good Bissouma is, he isn't both of them combined. And the amount of times we saw Lallana immediately dispossessed or just pressed and just physically battled all the time with the midfielders was him, and McAllister were just as culpable, I felt, just that McAllister was slightly further forward sometimes. He had the least touches in the game, actually. In fact, just Neil Mopai had less he played the full 90 minutes and had like no touches of the ball. But Lallana came off with an hour played with 39 touches of the ball. That's not Adam Lallana's game at all. Like that's the exact opposite of what you want from Lallana. You want him dominating that ball in the middle of the park and spraying it around. And I don't know whether it's so much of he was crap, but I think he was the wrong decision. I would have much preferred to have seen, when you're looking at the bench, I would have much preferred to have seen Jakob Moder in that central midfield role alongside Bissouma, and then put Alzate in that wing-back position if you want to. Not that he's particularly having a great time out there either, but somebody else, And I felt that he was in a bit of a losing battle. I felt that Lallana was not best placed to be in that fight yesterday.
I love what you said, because I think we have the beautiful gift of hindsight. But I agree. Like, looking back now, you probably would have had it where you had Alzate with a little pace on the left wing back. You probably put Veltman starting and right wing back and hope he doesn't give penalties away. And then you shore up your centre midfield pairing with a bigger guy in Moder and let him do what he does, which is kind of what you saw some of out of Cardiff, and that you saw for the first 2 minutes of the second half here, where he gets the ball and he'll just maraud forward. But at the same time, he's big enough to win those aerial battles and break up play as well. And we know what Bissouma does. I completely agree with you. I think this raises a bigger potential challenge tactically, just in terms of how we play and how we execute versus sides that play on more traditional formations. Because one of the reasons you have to imagine Lallana couldn't get the time he needed to actually receive the ball, play the right pass out, is because he was constantly under pressure. He was constantly getting pressured by those box-to-box midfielders and the forward dropping a little bit further back. And he just didn't have the space and time that he needs. And I also think, I know this is just a basic excuse, but the team did not look on their game across the board, like fatigue-wise, a lot of mistakes. Dunk cost us the first goal. It was his bad pass that then Allen received, I believe, of throw-in, and Allen got the ball and then played that really great pass forward. It was a bad day at the office, if we can frame it like that. But there is some more interesting things to think about formation-wise when we face 4-4-1-1, 4-4-2.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a knock-on impact to having those wing-backs and having to fill those slots at that left and right wing-back, which almost, I guess, to Potter's mind, means that Moder can't play at centre-mid because we need him at left wing-back. So, like you said, such a fluid formation in terms of how we play is, a lack of selection at those wing backs means that our central midfielders are now compromised in terms of who we want to play and who's best match against those teams. So it's not just getting a wing back in, it's the double bubble there in terms of you get Cucurella in, which means that Moder can now be up for selection for centre mid because we know that that's good. So I guess there is that knock-on impact. I think you're spot on though. The cliche bad day at the office. We just weren't able to get that momentum to push forward. It just kept broken up in play, and therefore the confidence doesn't rise, the influence on the game stops. And just across the board, I think that might be part of the parcel and why Basuma looked so outstanding yesterday compared to everyone else, because we just weren't able to get going. And Basuma's star power really stood out in terms of what he was doing, which obviously my man of the match is Basuma. I think in terms of what he did and what he was able to do with everyone else being subpar. I think it's a very logical choice. And I don't think there'll be too many aggravations with that.
Not from me. That was going to be mine too. There wasn't exactly a huge wealth of picks that I could pick from. Watford last week, where there was a lot more options where players were excellent. But this week it was, and it was the same at the end of last season. And I would tweet it quite a bit because I assumed he was gone. Like, I just assumed he was definitely gone this summer. And I would tweet pretty much at the end of every game. I was like, just enjoy what you saw because he's going to be gone. Like, that is one of the best box-to-box midfielders that they're ever going to play for us for now. Like, that have possibly ever played for us. Just enjoy what you're seeing from him. And in those games, when we were kind of safe and everybody was kind of taking their foot off the accelerator a little bit, like, he just looked a class above everybody else. And even yesterday, like, he looked the same against what is a superb Everton midfield that is playing under a very good manager. And he looked not an inch out of place. And to me, yeah, likewise, he was my man of the match, and it feels a bit of a low-hanging fruit to give it to him. But
we've talked about this. Like, we're it's ad nauseum at this point with him. He's man of the match until proven otherwise for me. Although you could argue it's probably Alan today, but let's not do that. The lack of depth in the team yesterday, we've talked about a lot. But I think the other thing that I was looking at as we got into the second half was, God, we need pace, right? We need someone that can come on and start to stretch the game a little bit more, move us out, get us out of these sort of stagnant positions. And I looked at the bench, and I don't know if you did the same. And the options that we had, so we heard Connolly maybe picked up a little tweak in the warm-ups, so he probably wasn't able to play. Wepu played in midweek, and also he's probably not quite there yet. We didn't have a ton of options to like really expand the game coming off of the bench, and it brings us back around to, I really, really hope that we sign a body that just allows us to move some pieces around, as opposed to just being sort of predictable in the changes that we make and bring on Welbeck and bring on Veltman. There wasn't a ton of other options for us.
No. And a call out, obviously, now Taylor Richards is getting a look in with his first start, like his first Prem sort of appearance in terms of what that was there.
Yeah.
Tried to do what he could in the 15 minutes that he had. But again, it's exciting again to have another one of those young guys come through, and Potter deems himself good enough to have him on the bench and to use him. So I guess, again, I'm trying to be optimistic in terms of what we saw, but I do want to see more of those options in terms of if he thinks Taylor Richards can do something for the team that the others can't, then by all means, like, let's try it. But I think it all goes down to the point that no matter what we tried yesterday, the result was going to be the same.
Yeah, and it's if we want to go to that area of good news, right now we sit 7th in the table. We've got a little break. We're going to have players come back from injury. We hopefully bring in a 1 or 2 players. The results were kind yesterday for the teams in and around us. A lot of draws. So there wasn't crazy things that occurred. And we made 2 big mistakes yesterday that cost us the game. Everton are a good team. They're probably going to finish top 7, top 8 this year. Let's focus on the fact that we collected points where we should have in the first couple of games, and we're going to continue to do that. And hopefully that continues when we face, I think, Brentford when we come back from the break. Yeah,
and to add to that kind of optimistic take as well, I have a spreadsheet that I have on my work laptop, and what it does, as I track season on season results because I'm like a loser. And what I have is I delete the season prior's results. So like the 2018-19 or whatever it was is gone. And I've just got last season's results all in a line of like where we got our points. And I put in our new results in like a head-to-head basis. Because a lot of people are like, oh, at this stage of the season, we're on 12 points. And it's like, yeah, but we've played 4 different teams. So it's much more logical to be like, well, how did we do against Burnley away last season? How did we do against Watford the season before? And in terms of the relegated teams, I kind of just have whoever came third bottom translates as top of the championship, second, bottom playoff winner. And we are obviously on 6 points. We took 4 points from the same games last season. If you want to see something real good, we've got Brentford, Leicester, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Norwich, and then Man City. It would take us until game week 9 against Manchester City for us to exceed that 6 point total on head-to-head games next year. So any points we get between now, Brentford, Leicester, Palace, Arsenal, Norwich, plenty that we should be looking at getting. They're just extras that are on top of that. Because, of course, we then went on to beat Man City, which would then put us on to 7 in head-to-heads. That's a lot. Like, when you think of, safety first, like, we're already at a point where we have just 2 games, just 2 wins early on in the season, opens that little bit of breathing room where you can go in there and start, building upon this. And every point we get from now to Manchester City is just extra.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I think we're a team. I think with Basuma staying, let's fingers crossed that continues to be the case. And we bring in, let's say we get Cucurella, because I think we've signed him 5 times at this point, seemingly, according to Twitter, in the last week. I personally, maybe I'm touching wood here. I don't really think it's a relegation discussion at that point with the quality that we have. There are 3 worse teams in this league than Brighton and Hove Albion. But then it's like, okay, so how do we then take ourselves to that slightly next phase? How do we get closer to that top half of the table? That feels like the discussion for us to potentially have when we come back from this international break. And it'd be nice to see us continue to pick up points from sides where we could or should get points, and anything from elsewhere, anything when we face the top 8, it's a bonus if we get something.
Yeah. I think, it was a very natural reaction yesterday to just sort of, take a whole, because we were so convincingly beaten. It's sort of like, oh, okay, here we go. It's very easy to be pessimistic, but, we're talking about a really good start to the season. We're looking at hopefully keeping the talisman and bringing in another body. Hopefully, it seems to have taken a year and a half, but in terms of getting those across the line, there's no, I don't think we need to overreact in terms of we got beaten by a very good Everton side that are going to be in the top half, whether you like it or not. So in terms of what we need to do, I think obviously we've got a break now, reset, recharge, Brentford away, and then we start, looking again at those games that we should be getting something from. I think it's a little bit too early to start wetting the bed, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I think, Norwich are not a good team. Just objectively, they're not a good team. Arsenal, I don't care how many people think it's disrespectful. They are a team that we should be looking at getting points from this season. They are not a good team. Brentford had a great start to the season. Will the international break come along and ruin their momentum a little bit, or will they be a good game? I suspect that probably the latter. I think it will be a pretty high energy game from them. But obviously there's absolutely no doubt we can go there and take a result off of them. We saw, and I don't know if you saw, but I definitely saw in the playoffs how easily Brentford are nullified by possession-based teams, which we are. So, they really were quite lucky to get through those playoffs in some respects, because they were playing teams that were happy to just keep the ball, and they really struggled with that. And at Premier League level, they played Arsenal, which definitely aren't a possession-based team. They're just Arsenal. They don't know what on earth they're doing. And they played, did they play Leeds last weekend?
Yeah. I think it's a away draw.
Yeah. So, you're looking at that, and then you're playing Aston Villa yesterday, who, again, are not that possession-based football playing side, they prefer to hit you on the counter attack, and especially now with your Leon Baileys and your Buendias and your rapid, counter attacking style footballers, this is going to be a different kind of prospect for Brentford that they've seen all season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they adapt to that.
Arsenal, Palace, Villa for Brentford so far.
A kind start, isn't it? Really, you didn't think it would be with Arsenal but deep down you knew it would be because they're not very good. Rich in the chat does still think Gross is too slow, too many backward passes.
He didn't get faster in the last week, so he's right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, we discussed that, right? In this game, his pace was an issue, but we talked about how the fact that our whole system was nullified. So yes, he looked bad, and yes, we had to pass backwards because we had no overlap on the wings. So and the center was too bogged down. So he is right.
Yep, I think it'll be interesting next week, or the week after, rather. Or the week after that, actually, because it's the international break, for God's sake. It'll be interesting to see how we line up against Leicester, given they have similar midfielders to Everton. And what we notice as fans with McAllister and Lallana and, that kind of stuff, it'll be very interesting to see what team Potter puts out there against a team that is very similar to Everton, if not just of a better quality. They have some very good wide play. Harvey Barnes will eat Pascal Gross for breakfast if he's put out there in a one-on-one situation. That's scary.
Well, we should have Lamptey by then, no? Or
that's the hope, right? Because it never gets old watching Jamie Vardy lose the sprint to Lamptey and just realize that he's out of his depth for the first time in a long time. So
it'll be September 19th. So you would hope Lamptey's capable at that point. But again, Leicester, top 6, top 7 team. Oh. Let's go into it with expectations of hoping for the best, but also getting a point out of that game would be amazing.
Yep. And I mean, we take 3 points from Brentford before that, right? And you're kind of just not even that bothered. Like, it was like 9 points from 5 games again, and the 2 losses were Leicester and Everton. Well, I think I can deal with that.
And with outside of the Carabao game in between Leicester, you got Palace after that. You want points from Brentford, you want points from Palace.
Transfer window. I think we've said all we can say about the Everton game. 3 days left. Lots of rumours still floating about. Some massive signings have gone through. Your Messis, your Ronaldos. And things are trickling down in that respect. Saw a bunch of rumours this morning that Brighton inquired on Friday as soon as the Ronaldo thing went through about Dan James. He started today against Wolves and was hauled off pretty early in the second half, and the United fans are giving him grief online. Darwin Núñez started today. He is playing currently for Benfica. That feels dead in the water. Cucurella was not in the squad, but was fit for Getafe. They said he had a muscular injury, and would not expand any further. So that feels like one of those same reasons where like they have a knock, so they can't go on international break. What are we expecting here? It's not like Brighton to do 3 or 4 deals on the last day, but it's not like Brighton to make £60 million in profit either on a transfer window. What are we expecting, Craig? What are you hoping to see here?
I mean, like you said, the Núñez one seems dead in the water. And I think from a striker perspective, I don't think we're going to see anything. Personally, the wing backs, as we've talked about at length, in terms of having another option there, and bringing in Cucurella, who has been long rumoured, I think at the minimum, that's what we should be looking for and what I want. I think it's more important than the striker. In all honesty, I think our issues, like we said, lie in the midfield and being able to commit and be able to do stuff from there. So the Cucurella is probably my most important one. We've seen a lot of people go out defensively, which hints at the fact that there has to be something coming in. You've got Jean-Paul Van Heck just went out to Blackburn. It's another centre back that's now gone, with Burns still on the injury table, and now Kobovnik gone to Olympiacos. we're starting to get thinner and thinner at that defensive abilities. Considering we play 5 at the back, it's looking very thin. So that would be my minimum expectation, that we should see some defensive bodies come in. I think we're a little bit spread too thin.
Seen some rumors linking us to, and I don't know how you say that first one, Czech. Like, I'm going to go with Czech will be fine. Nias, do you think this would be a good move? I will go first in saying I know nothing about him. From the brief search I did yesterday after seeing his name, he seems like a holding midfielder in the same mold as Bissouma was sold to us as for Lille. I've never watched him play. So unfortunately, Nick, I cannot give you any info on that. If we are not selling Bissouma, which obviously is the default, I hope, I don't see any reason to invest in another midfielder at all. It seems to be the least optimistic place to head to is signing a central midfielder. But Craig, Adam, if you have anything else on him, please do jump in. I haven't got a clue.
I have not done a ton of research into Senegalese players playing for Lille, I'll be honest. But as you say, like, I mean, we talked last week, but to just counter what you said a little bit, in the sense that, yes, we've got a ton of central midfielders, but outside of Bissouma, in terms of like really solidified, more defensive-minded box-to-box midfielders, that's not Gross, that's Lot Lallana, that's not really Jakob Moda. We think Casado may go out on loan. That's been the big set of rumors. So, I mean, it wouldn't hurt in my mind to have a nice young potential thinking to the future. Bissouma probably leaves next year at best. Then let's have someone that we can bring in on the cheap and then, you know, repeat the process. So I wouldn't personally hate that. It doesn't solve our immediate issues, though, is the main thing. I agree with Craig. We need let's bring in a winger. But we have to get the Cucurella deal in. I mean, at this point, if you don't get it in, that's going to be just it'd be sad at that point, wouldn't it? We'd feel disheartened, I think, as a fan base, because there's been so much talk about it. I'd like to see Dan James in. Obviously, we've got the Potter links. We know that we tried really hard to get Dan James in before we moved to Man United. They kind of came in at the last minute and grabbed him. I know we don't play out and out full wingers up the pitch, but think if we had the option of Cucurella and Dan James, and then we had Solly and Lamptey behind them, that's a different team. That's a different team pace-wise. It's exciting. And then you actually get to see, well, what do we get out of Mope? What do we get out of Welbeck? Your striker discussion suddenly maybe is a little different. If they screw it up, then you need a striker.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You get Dan James out there, and although I agree, like, we don't play without and out wingers, Potter has got unbelievable results out of Dan James before. So clearly he thinks he could do so again, I'm sure. Knowing Graham to be who he is, like, he's absolutely convinced he could probably keep him at that level. And then, like you say, we've got a full season of watching Dan James, Cucurella, Solly March, Tarek Lamptey, Mwepu, if he turns out to be as good as he could be. You know, all these players feeding the ball in, Trossard, McAllister feeding the ball in from just about every angle you could want. And that's not even including Pascal Gross. If you're still not scoring goals, or even worse, you're starting to see, you know, Mope with like an XG of like 17 and scoring 7, or like Trossard with like an XG of 20 and scoring 6, and you're like realizing they're actually getting worse at finishing chances because they're on their plate. I think you've got to. I would be happy if we reinforced with 2 or 3 signings that are going to help the strikers, if that means we don't get a striker.
Just does the window close on Tuesday?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that there's something in the winger talk, isn't there? When, you know, we've been linked to a couple throughout this time, but nothing's really come of it in terms of what they want. But I think, minimum, we need defensive bodies in there. And like you said, the prospect of having Dan James and Cucurella expand our options, not just like for like replacements, but also from the way that Potter's going to set certain teams up, to have a different option and to be able to do something different with certain different players and playing to their strengths as well. Then we move into that conversation of it has to be the striker then, because this is working and we can make it work. It'll be interesting. We've got a couple more days. I'm sure it's going to be the typical Brighton way in terms of either just disappointing or actually, pretty damn good. If we see Cucurella come in and nothing else, I'd consider it a good window. I wouldn't say great, but you've made a lot of profit there, and you've brought in a very good and a very young wing back that backs up our ability to play as a 5. Then you're talking about the injuries coming back in terms of Solly and Lamptey. Let's hope that Solly's injury isn't too bad. Let's hope that Lamptey continues full training. Then all of a sudden you have 3 different options, and all of a sudden you've got Burn back and you've got Veltman that's able to play at centre back. So if you do need to take Duffy out, or if you do need to play more of a possession base and you want to put Veltman in, just again, I think the additional option of that wing back opens up the centre backs, opens up the midfielders, and opens up all of these other options that unlocks the rest of the team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because that's exactly the part because I think we all collectively worried when we see all these players going out on loan. We're like, well, hold on. What happens if Dunk gets injured? But yeah, this is, if you have replacements that are actually positional players that can play, because if we got Cucurella and James, you could completely imagine Potter playing. Cucurella plays left back for some games. Dan James, you'd throw in at right wing back. You could see that happen. But as you say, then that means famous left back Dan Burn can then actually play in centre defence. Veltman can play in centre defence. We have that cover there. We'll see how it plays out. I agree, though. I can't imagine a name that has not been associated with the club just randomly comes in the next 2 days. But it's a lot to that Dan James stuff, because we know he's potentially surplus to requirements now over at Man U, and we have relationships there. We have history, and the Cucurella thing has been talked about more than pretty much any other transfer. Those 2 are my hope. The biggest winners we talked about, keep Basuma. That's the win for the transfer window.
And let's talk about that elephant in the room, right? What if we don't? What does that window look like if last day of the transfer window, Man United, right, with Fred being how wank he is, Man United come in, £70 million bid. They know they're overpaying because they could probably get him for 60 or whatever. They come in, 70 million quid. This is going to be the difference that wins us the title this year. This is their belief. Put him in there in that central midfield role, and we accept it. What's the say it's part of the Dan James deal? What's the verdict then? We're now short Basuma. We sign Cucurella. We sign Dan James on a perm, and we sell Basuma. How does that window look then? Because it's still a very real possibility. When you see how good he is, these scouts are not blind. What's the feeling then? I know that's not a nice thing to have to answer, but it's a reality we're probably going to have to face.
If those other 2 players were to come in, I'll entertain this sort of nightmare fantasy. Then I don't think it would be, because he's going to leave. It's when, not if. This is where we are as a club. We will sell a premium player to make a massive return on investment for him. We'll reinvest those funds to repeat the process with 2, 3, 4 of them. I think the biggest thing for me is then you start to think about, you then are really back in worrying about a relegation battle and trying to get out of that. So that's how it changes your system. All you're then hoping for, if you're Barber, Ashworth, Bloom, we survive this year, and then we have a fuckload of money to spend. That's what you do. Is that comfortable? Maybe not. But when's the last time Brighton had over £100 million in the bank to spend?
I mean, the fact that Ben White was more than our entire outgoing transfers in our entire history since 1901 put together.
Yeah.
So.
Precisely. So yeah.
It's a far cry from what we're used to, isn't it? In terms of, you're now talking a minimum of 45, 50 for Basuma. You're making 100 million off 2 players from a Brighton perspective. I think, he has to stay. I don't know what the options are in terms of if he leaves in the next couple of days, just what that looks like. You've got Mwepu, you've got Caicedo, obviously Lallana needs to stay in the middle. But yeah, you're spot on. Then it's more of a case of, okay, let's look at those three worst teams in the league then, because Bissouma is that difference between, a world-class central defensive midfielder that's so integral to the way that we play, taking that strong link out and taking what is almost part of the spine of that team. And now at this point, I would be very worried. I think, yeah, Adam's spot on that the most important bit of business that we can do is keep Bissouma.
It's fun. It would be fun to think, though, the amount of money to have. Like, think about sitting back at the with Dean. Sort of a scaffolding set up that moved if you sort of like put a foot down, and then think a few years later potentially having 100x million in the bank to spend. Like, that's in and of itself a hell of an achievement. So
yeah, and I guess it's that we're finally starting to see the fruits of Gus Poyet and Tony Bloom's vision 10 years ago, because I remember very distinctly when they were talking about when we were bringing in like Henrik Bjordal and like random players like Roland Bergkamp, and like they were both Bloom and Gus were very clear that this was a project and they were intending to become a development, like their development squad was supposed to be the envy of England. And we're starting to see these young players being brought through that are now either we're buying, snapping them up when no one else thinks about them. Ben White, Tarek Lamptey, this Jeremy Sarmiento fella that we've just signed, we don't know what will happen with him and others. And we're starting to see those players start to come good. And like you said, that's Southampton have made their entire last 15 years off of it, barring one or two absolute meltdowns. And I think that I trust Barber and I trust Bloom and I trust just the structure in the team in general to not have that same meltdown that Southampton had in the early 2010s where they just sank. Because
they might be doing it again now, sort of, in a way. But the other thing that we haven't talked about at all, and maybe you did a little bit before, Josh, but is keeping Potter this off season for I mean, he makes this whole thing work. The fact that he was touted with some of those bigger jobs, and I was very scared he was going to go to Spurs. That's the other piece. So this every fan of every team in the league right now is looking at their club, bar Chelsea, I think, and maybe now Man United. And there's been a question mark in the first three games. Poor performance, a lack of this, a player missing or whatnot. We're in a good spot. We've got some money in the bank. We've got some fresh faces we can potentially bring in. And we still have right now a world-class player in the team.
Yeah, but genuinely nothing else to add. I think that's a really good point as well, is that we overlooked the fact that there were allegedly multiple clubs looking at Potter in terms of bringing him in and being able to have what is a quality coach. So, to Josh's point as well, in terms of just trusting the system and trusting the people that are running the club and where we are and where we came from as well, there's always that perspective in our minds because of how far we've come so quickly and how much these individuals have done for our club. It's always nice just to, again, think from a perspective and say, look, I can't even imagine selling an academy product for £50 million. And now we're talking about, we're not going to let our centre midfielder go for less than £50 million. Like, it's such a far cry from even 7-8 years ago. You're talking about, the Craig McHale Smiths and like spending $2.5 million.
His name still haunts me.
I mean, even just a few years ago where Tony Bloom doubled down on Dale Stevens running out his contract, when we could have got £4 or £5 million for him, and that being a lot of money back then. And Bloom was like, no, like, he's going to be a reason we get promoted. I'm going to keep him and take the loss if necessary. And that was a big loss 5 years ago. Like, that's wild.
I don't like getting hung up on it as well, because I think there's no point thinking about things that are gone now. But how do you think Ben White feels right now?
He's pretty much had the nightmare start as he plays against Brentford with not his first 11 backline. He then immediately catches COVID, misses the England call-up because of that. Not that we knew whether he'd get in anyway, and then has to watch his now team just get battered. And knowing he's probably going to be coming back in to play Norwich, which, if they weren't to get 3 points from that, will lead to one of the biggest shit shows that you've seen in the Arsenal fan base.
This guy's been wonderful.
Possibly ever.
Yeah. I won't be missing those AFTV episodes in the next. If this continues, like I'll watch it with popcorn. It just like you said, like the expectation there, provided like the team that they've got at the moment, like it's pretty mad to think about in terms of, and we're talking about all these transfers and all these Ronaldos and Messi's moving and stuff like that. When you're Arsenal and you've spent £135 million this transfer window, and you've started with scored none, conceded 9. I understand the meltdown, from that perspective. I don't see a way out for them either. I know we're going down this Arsenal tangent, but in terms of such a bad start, is that can they actually pick themselves back up?
Of course, we'll be very complimentary of Arsenal when they loan us Reece Nelson, and he performs incredibly well. But yeah, for now we can laugh at them.
Maybe we will become Leeds and get really angry when they won't sell us to him for peanuts the year after.
Yeah.
But I mean, we are, we're getting through the month of September, and I'm not sure what Arsenal's fixtures look like outside of the Norwich one. Ours are rather kind before we end up playing them, a bar in the Leicester game. And just because it is funny, because they are in such a meltdown, this Arsenal team, it's not totally inconceivable if they weren't to pick up points against Norwich, which is almost unthinkable given they're at home and Norwich are that bad. But if they don't, they've got Burnley away after that and then Spurs. So they could be coming to the Amex on the back of a beating at home to their biggest rivals in Spurs with 0 to 4 points in the bank. With 8 games in, it could be just, if Neil Mopai scores a hat trick there, like Arsenal Fan TV might shut down. Like it may just end up like they may like just be incapable of doing anything.
You know what my biggest concern is with where they're at and when we face them? They might have the new manager bounce because a caretaker's coming. Like, that's my main concern.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how long you trust the process for. I mean, Aubameyang came out yesterday and basically said the team don't have any, what did he say, like character or drive or like pretty courage. Thank you. Yeah. Pretty damning to say that.
From your captain as well.
Yeah. Cowardly Arsenal. Here we are.
That's all I've got. I think we've covered just about everything. We will be recording in the international break. We will have Stateside Seagulls on as a guest, and we will be unpacking whatever these next 3 days bring at us. So I'm sure there will be plenty to talk about. Not as much as usual, obviously, because it's not a game, but I'm sure that regardless, we're going to have plenty. Even if we don't sign anyone between then and now, we will have that. That will be a discussion in and of itself. So
we'll talk 45 minutes about signing Cucurella in January.
Anything else from either of you two before we wrap up?
No, it'll be good. Obviously next week with Stateside Seagulls on as well. That'll be class. So looking forward to it already. All
good from me. I'm positive about what happens after the international break. We've got 6 points from our first 3 games. We're looking all right. We lost a game to a very, very experienced international team. We're fine.
Agreed. Reasons to be cheerful, absolutely. For now, 3 days from now, I might not feel as cheerful, but we will see you all next week. Stay safe and have a good one.
Awesome. Thank you.